Meow! Huples cat. I've been doing some home baking. I'm going to work tonight for 3 nights, as is Kitty, and that's why I haven't quite shaved. But I'll be having a bath and having a really nice tight shave so the N95s can fit me. And as you can see, I'm continuing to recycle them and they continue to fall apart. So I'm actually going to show you how I fix them. But the purpose of this video is, you've seen the 170 centigrade. So I did a batch at 170 Fahrenheit. So the purpose of this video is to actually show you an experiment I've done with my mask recycling at home. I do not recommend it. I recommend that you use single-use N95 masks at work. If you don't have any at work, you either use a surgical mask or nothing, or you've recycled your own N95s. I personally am going to use recycled N95s rather than have a surgical mask on. I don't like them. So 170 Fahrenheit, half an hour, above 56 centigrade for 15 minutes supposed to work, left in a transparent plastic box for a week or so in the sunlight on the deck before I handle them. So I'll show you the setup because it's evolving as everything does. So what I'm using for very non-contaminated masks are these, and then these will go into hot water drying. And as you can see, this one is broken and I will show you how you fix it. But what I did differently today was I actually did 2 of them that were fairly damaged at 250 Fahrenheit for half an hour. So they all went in at 170 Fahrenheit for 30 minutes, and then 2 of them I left in and increased the temperature to 250 Fahrenheit. Obviously it wasn't 250 Fahrenheit for the full 30 minutes because it started from 170 Fahrenheit. And as Kitty asked me, yes, I did actually set 170 Fahrenheit before I put the masks in. So there you go. It's noticeably hotter. And of course this is the baking tray I'm using, just this baking tray. When it cools down I keep it separate. So there's the masks. How did they fare? Well, there's obvious browning. And as you can see, straps fell off. I wouldn't use this. Nor would I use this. So there you have it. In a conventional oven baking without a fan on, masks will not tolerate 250 centigrade without browning. And frankly, if it's browning on the outside, I have no idea what's happening to the weave on the inside, therefore I can't use them. Both of those masks were in pretty bad shape anyway. That's why I decided to do the experiment. And what I will do probably in a week or 2 when I have another batch of masks to do is I will try 1 or 2 that are broken really badly, and I'll try doing them at 200 Fahrenheit for half an hour. Interesting. I have heard that 250 Fahrenheit works. Clearly it doesn't. Now with the contaminated masks, and by that I mean COVID-19 exposure for sure, because Kitty's worn them in the room or has worn them intubating, and we have one we've kept so far and we're leaving it for a full 28 days before we handle it. I would use PPE to put them in the oven. So an ordinary stapler, you could sew these and you should have elasticated straps, but all you basically do is this. Get the strap, keep the strap straight, so you want it flat, remember that's an important thing. Okay, get the strap, put it approximately where you want it. It's not rocket science, this. Apparently this is what happened to the pandemic stockpile we had. Their elastic had broken, so being stupid they threw them out. But as I said, if you'd just given the nurses with a bunch of this material, we would have done it. And that's one of the other interesting things as well. I mentioned in a previous video we're actually running out of medications, cystocurium and a few other things that we need to ventilate, and also for ICU. And we're going to be careful how we use them. But I forgot to mention my hospital actually got a huge amount of that hydrochloroquine malaria drug at the beginning of this, before people were buying it, before President Trump was touting it as a cure or a preventative, which it probably almost definitely isn't. My hospital actually got a huge stock of it and put it away. And the reason we put it away was so we can continue to treat arthritis and lupus patients, because I think in large parts of the world patients who absolutely critically need that medication aren't able to get it because a bunch of idiots have bought it at huge prices and are storing it, or taking it, even worse, to try and prevent themselves getting COVID-19 disease, which is a shame. I haven't seen any research yet at all that's reliable that shows it makes any difference at all, both in either prevention or in outcome. And to be honest with you, a preventative study would be very difficult to do. You would need to know that people were actually not infected at the beginning of the study, and you'd need it to be double blind. You need at least 1,000 to 2,000 people, half of whom get the med, half of them get another med, both sides don't know which med they're getting, and then see what happens. And that's going to be very difficult to do in a pandemic. I know the French particularly are really pushing this as a good idea. As I've said before, this medication has been used. It was used in SARS, it was used in MERS, and it was used in Ebola, and it killed people. It cures and keeps primates alive in studies, but the doses to have any effect on the viral load in a human being, in those three conditions, it killed people. It didn't save anybody. It made mortality much, much worse. So that's why I think my hospital's still not trying to do a clinical trial with it. We are doing clinical trials as part of the WHO with antiviral medications for HIV. I'm not seeing much of a benefit yet, but you have to be wary of these things. You know, if like 8 patients are on it and 3 of them do really well, that's great, but who knows, they might have done well anyway. You know, if all 8 of them do great and then you repeat it on another 10 and they all do great, then yes, you've got a winner. So it's never going to be that clear cut. You're going to get 3.2 do well as opposed to 3.0 do well over hundreds of cases, and then you might want to use the medication. But again, what are we going to do for HIV prophylaxis if we use all of the HIV meds? So I think we're still focusing very much on protecting and preventing death once death is almost certainly to occur, because we've had to ventilate because of oxygenation, and we're looking for stuff that works with the vasculature and helps oxygenation and all the rest of it, and ventilation of different modalities and proning and maybe some meds, we don't know, certainly do that. But the key point here is this is a pandemic. It's ongoing. There's millions of cases across the planet right now. There will be probably hundreds of thousands to millions of ICU cases across the planet before this is finished. What we really need to be focusing the money and the research effort on is stopping people catching it and stopping them from needing ICU if they do catch it. That's what we need to be really focusing the money, time and the attention on. We need to be, as I've said before, having community nursing set up so people can go into homes safely and help them out. You know, everybody should be wearing a mask in public. A surgical mask or a bandana is just fine. It really will prevent transmission from the people wearing it to others, and it also will give them a little bit of protection. Remember, they're not in a sealed room working for 3 hours trying to stop somebody from dying who's on a ventilator, so they probably don't need an N95. But as I've said before, if you've got immune system problems, if you have a severely compromised immune system and you are forced to go out, or people are coming into your home, you need an N95 on. And of course hand washing, and of course thinking about clothing and hair and the rest of it. So yeah, Kitty has ordered scissors and she's gonna try and cut my hair, and we will video that experience. I think I might need to be drunk for it, but I'm going to try and make sure Kitty isn't. Bit of a disappointment. I was hoping 250 Fahrenheit for an hour would work great on recycling the masks, because definitively that would definitely scorch the virus to death. Didn't work. Masks can't tolerate that. I do know that masks tolerate 170. This is now the second time through with this mask, and it's doing okay. Some have a slight browning on them, these don't. So I'm going to have to be very careful. My hospital is going to recycle, I think, 5 times. I've got a feeling I'm going to get about 5 times out of these as well. So that again is an issue. You know, if you have 40 masks and you use the N95 to go shopping every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, you don't need to go weekly, and this goes on for a year or more, you might run out of masks. So make sure you don't just chuck these out. These are like gold, right? This is a protective mechanism that can prevent you catching COVID-19 disease. It's an absolute gold standard. Everybody in healthcare right now around patients should be wearing these 24/7 at work and having adequate ones to remove them and discard, hopefully recycle them. And we don't. The emergency nurses are still wearing surgical masks. The ICU nurses are still wearing surgical masks. Okay, we have these available for intubation, we have a level 3 mask available for being in the room, but everybody should have N95. It's an absolute tragedy that we don't. It's a global issue. I do expect them to put a ton of money and effort into this, and I do expect before we get into May that every nurse and every paramedic and every doctor and every cleaner and every porter in every hospital and every old people's home in the first world, the West, has adequate supply of PPE. If we don't, you have to wonder why. So that's it from me, and that's it from Becky. Take care. Remember, in a pandemic, tomorrow will always be worse than today unless you prepare. And even if you prepare in a pandemic, it will always be worse than today because we're going up. So I just want to talk about the peak. Nobody's reached the peak. I think it's kind of amusing they keep claiming, oh, we've reached the peak in cases. We haven't. We're going up the slope. Everybody's going up the slope, except possibly China, which has stopped transmission by literally stopping people touching each other or being near each other. But I just want to point out to you that when we go up the peak of a pandemic infection, when we come down again, it's a linear scale. So however many are infected on the way up is the same as infected on the way down. And however many die on the way up, generally speaking, that's how many more will die on the way down. It won't just stop tomorrow. This is a curve, a roller coaster possibly, but for sure a definitive curve. And flattening the curve has worked in Toronto so far, touch wood, by literally preventing a large body of patients who are elderly and living in homes from coming into acute care. And that's what saved us from the Italy surge. And that's what saved a lot of nursing and doctors and porters and cleaners from catching and then maybe dying from COVID-19 disease in Toronto towards the end of April. So how it's going to go from here is anybody's guess. A lot of people talking about the second wave. What we're seeing around the world right now, when lockdowns reduced and cases rise again, is not the second wave. The waves are like this, little peaks, micro peaks and valleys, okay? And that's what we're seeing. It wasn't out of the community, it's now allowed to transmit to person again because the lockdowns ended too soon, so they see cases rising again. A second wave phenomena will be a distinct plateau of almost no new cases, or very few new cases and very few deaths for at least 2 or 3, 4 weeks. And then if we get a second wave, you will see a rising peak again. The rising peak can be as bad as the first wave, worse than the first wave, or not as bad as the first wave. And then we can get third, fourth and fifth waves. This can go on for a long time. As I've said before, it's going to be a very bumpy year. Brace tight. We're being told in Canada that this won't be over in terms of lockdown till at least June, and I think that's realistic. And how it's affecting people's minds and how it's affecting how they deal with all of this is a subject for an entirely different video. But stay safe, keep your distance, and make sure you don't catch it, okay? Whether you believe it's planned, whether you believe it's a bioweapon, whether you believe that China did this deliberately to affect Trump getting re-elected, I don't know and I don't care. It's real, it's often airborne, you can catch it, and any age group can catch it and die from it, okay? So stay safe. This has been a slow-moving Hungry Terrier production 2020.